So Isaac, what do you think is the world's most popular drug?
Is alcohol a drug?
Alcohol? Okay, cool.
I'd probably say alcohol.
Liana, come around here so I can see your face.
Cocaine.
Cocaine, okay. Hazel?
Ibuprofen.
Ibuprofen, okay. Andrew? Andrew, behind the grill, what do you think is the world's most widely taken drug?
Caffeine.
Well done, we have a winner.
Endurance sport has always been associated with coffee, particularly cycling, whether it's the Club Sunday run that basically bases its entire route about where it's going to be stopping on the way back to get a cup of coffee, or whether it's down to things like now where you're finding athletes that are actually selling their own coffee brand. But cycling has always been a sponsor right the way back to the mid-60s. Look at Eddie Merckx's Tour de France win in 1969 when he was riding for the Fama Espresso Company. And how about the Café de Colombia team? Now, okay, in the 80s they won multiple races, but I think more importantly in terms of their history, I think their mid-80s to late 80s jersey is definitely up there in one of the top 5 of the classiest that's ever been designed. And how about the inimitable Mario Cipollini with his famous red Seiko lead-out train? Or how about in 1981 when Giovanni Battaglin won both the Giro and the Vuelta for the Inexpran team? Or perhaps a touch more recently with the Trek Segafredo team. They helped me out massively with my Grand Tour last year and have been major sponsors since 2015. And from its African origins, coffee was spread throughout Asia and finally up into Europe by Somali merchants. And nowadays it's hard to find a country in the world that doesn't have coffee culture that's steeped in hundreds of years of history. Indeed, in London in 1675, Charles II tried to close down the popular coffee houses because it was passionately fueling political dissent, which didn't suit him at all. My own relationship with coffee is an interesting one. 13 years ago, I gave it up completely. I was working from home a lot, particularly working for drum magazines, writing copy and proofreading stuff, and the monotony of the day sat in front of the computer meant that I would break up that monotony by going making a cup of coffee. I'm sure it's the same for a lot of us. And what I found was happening was I would start 10 jobs and perhaps finish one of them. I also found my sleep pattern greatly disrupted, and also I'd get these kind of anxiety heart palpitations. And I really didn't put 2 and 2 together and realised that caffeine might be the problem. A friend of mine pointed it out to me, who'd also given up caffeine. Now, I decided to give up caffeine and go cold turkey, and quite frankly, the following month or so, it's one of the most unpleasant months of my life entirely. I had so much pain, so many headaches, that after about 3 or 4 weeks I actually went to our GP to find out if there wasn't something more sinister going on. And she explained to me just how horrendous caffeine withdrawal can be, particularly when you're drinking between 4 and 6 cups a day. Caffeine is the world's most widely taken psychoactive drug. 90% of the world's population have a daily interaction with caffeine in one form or another. Its effects are enormous. As a performance enhancing drug for us sports people, if WADA could ban it, they would ban it. Indeed, between 1984 and 2004, it was on the watch list and being monitored, and you actually had a ceiling of how much caffeine you could have in your system to compete. It has a very wide and profound impact on your body chemistry, and we'll go into what some of those are and how that affects us as athletes, and some of it will explain why I decided at the start of this year to have just one cup of coffee a day. Good morning. You guys all cool if I smash some psychoactive drugs on camera? Cheers. So you're probably all familiar with how a cup of coffee affects you in day-to-day life. It makes you more alert, it makes you more awake, it actually makes you feel a bit happier because of the dopamine release. However, how does it affect us as athletes? Well, first of all, let's get some dosage and some information about how to take it first of all. 60 to 30 minutes before performance seems to be the best time to get it ingested, although during a race also might help if you've got a big push towards the end of it or something, another caffeine gel will help. But if you've got a time trial or a short sprint race, coffee or some sort of caffeine ingestion 60 to 30 minutes before performance is going to be optimal. Now, how much do you need to take? Well, it would appear that 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilo of body weight is the optimum amount that research seems to show as being the right amount. Now, how much is that? Well, it's around about a strong cup of coffee, right the way up to a couple of strong cups of coffee. So anything from your normal coffee that you'd have in the morning to maybe a double espresso or something is probably going to be okay. You can push that higher, but then we get into some of the side effects, which we'll talk about a bit later. Okay, so caffeine has a stimulating effect on our central nervous system. One of the ways that it makes us feel more awake is by blocking the adenosine receptors in our body. The adenosine receptors slowly fill up during the day and gradually make us feel more tired. So one of the ways it makes us feel more awake, ironically, is to stop us feeling more tired. It also activates the noradrenaline hormones, which gives us a dopamine rush, which makes us feel more alert and more awake, and also brings that happy feeling that a lot of people talk about when they say they feel grumpy in the morning before they've had a cup of coffee. But one of the main outputs of this is that it has a painkiller effect. It lowers our perception of effort that we're putting into something. It also reduces our feelings of fatigue, and it also increases our focus and our mental agility. So research shows that caffeine increases fat oxidation. Now that's one of the reasons why I started drinking coffee again, because my main focus for the first quarter of this year is to get rid of this weight. So I started drinking coffee again because it aids fat oxidation. Now, that helps you if you're trying to lose weight by making you more efficient at burning fat as a fuel source. But as an athlete, even if you're not trying to lose weight, if you're an endurance athlete, one of the biggest things that we have to contend with is trying to resupply our body with glycogen for that more intense exercise that we need to fuel through carbohydrates and glycogenesis. So by improving your ability to burn fat as a fuel source and pushing that threshold up a little bit higher, it means we can keep that glycogen stored in our liver and our muscles, and that way we can use it for longer. And caffeine also increases thermogenesis, and that's the body's heat production, and the heat production that it creates also burns fat as a fuel source. Caffeine also improves muscle performance. There's good research to show that there are ergogenic benefits from caffeine. Increased muscle contraction, strength endurance, movement velocity, and power output are all improved with the use of caffeine. So, yeah, pretty handy stuff. I'd imagine at some point in your life you've probably OD'd a little bit on caffeine, and you'll know what some of these side effects are, and they can be pretty unpleasant if you overdo it. Anxiety, uncomfortable increased heart rate, insomnia, irritability, stomach upset, all these kind of things are pretty unpleasant side effects if you get your dosage wrong or you're not used to it. Now, most of you are probably using caffeine without even really thinking about it being part of your prep for a race. And fasting from caffeine can actually highlight the difference between what it feels like to be caffeinated and not caffeinated, i.e. it can have a bigger impact on you mentally during race day. As somebody that didn't have caffeine for 13 years, I can tell you that having drunk coffee on a daily basis for the best part of 2 months, I can still notice the benefits. However, some people are completely oblivious to this because they're so used to it by now. So to notice the benefits ready for race day, a 10 to 14 day fast before a race will make you realize just how elevated you are after having your coffee dosage. However, that's not to say that if you don't fast from coffee, having coffee on race day or before a big training session will have a benefit. The research shows that even without the fast, you will get the benefit, but you might not notice it so much as if you can go through a 10 to 14 day fast. Don't forget as well that caffeine is a diuretic, which means you need to keep an eye on your water intake. You shouldn't need to take much more on board, but do make sure you are getting that water in your system to combat the diuretic nature of caffeine. So a huge amount of benefits to a simple cup of coffee, some of which you probably knew, but I'd hope you learned a little bit more about how it can help us as endurance athletes. Fancy a brew? Ah.